Ladies and gentlemen, could you please sit down? Okay. This conference, ladies and gentlemen, has the title, What is News Now? And who else can talk better about the media nowadays with all this digital transformation than a person who started his career with AOL? Who remembers AOL? Not many anymore. So we talked a lot today about the opportunities and challenges of digital change in this industry. And we found, I guess, the right person to help us a little bit with this, to sort out the topics and to tell us more about digital transformation in the media business. He was with Google, he was with Spotify Labs. He became the CEO of a news aggregator called Dig. And now he's the CEO of the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. Please welcome on stage Gary Liu. We also invited tonight our good friend Alan Soon. You have a lot of fans here. He was Yahoo's managing editor for India and the Southeast Asia. And he's the reason, I didn't call you on stage yet. And let me say, he's the reason why there is a Yahoo law in Singapore. Now, he's the co-founder and CEO of the Splice Newsroom here in Singapore, and he helps media in the region and all over the world with this digital transformation. So please welcome now on stage Alan Soon. Thank you very much. Our moderator for tonight.
Hilarious. Oh, how are you? That's loud.
Should I turn mine on now?
I turned mine on, so.
Oh, here we go. Mine works.
Okay, good. Good.
That was
Everyone's
the-
good? Everyone still has
That
a
was
hearing?
the electricity between you
Oh,
and me.
no, this is bad. Oh, this is bad.
Okay.
Okay,
Good stuff.
are we good? Are we not? No? So I've got my notes on my phone. So I'm not looking at Twitter. Just once. So I was in your office last week.
Yeah, I
you
missed
weren't
you.
there. I was there for your beer night, and you guys have an amazing product called Pale Ale.
Pale Ale. It is a IPA that we have. Yeah.
How do you get around to deciding? Well, you know what? Let's get to that later, because I think that's far more interesting than all this transformation stuff we're talking about. And of course, that echo is still going on. So Gary, it's been a year, 6 months.
Yeah,
roughly?
about 18 months now.
Yeah, a long journey in where the SCMP is today. When I was there last week, I was really surprised at just the energy that I saw in the office, which I didn't see in the old office. People were talking to each other, hanging out, having great conversations, but also doing some great work, it seemed. I liked the energy that I saw in the office, and I thought, wow, all this has happened within a year and 6 months, and a lot more people as well. So you've gone around and basically soaked up talent from across all these newsrooms.
We're very fortunate. Thank you for training such excellent journalists.
If I'm not mistaken, you are also headcount neutral. So while you've hired a whole bunch of people, you've adjusted it and basically reorganized it where you're not adding more headcount.
That's not quite true. We have added over 100 new headcount
Right.
incremental headcount.
Incremental.
But there also has been a lot of redistribution of resources internally over the course of the last 18 months that has allowed not only our newsroom to grow by around 100, but also our product and technology teams to grow from 40 people to 120 to triple in size.
Right.
So it is a combination of incremental headcount and some redistribution.
So let's talk about that redistribution. Did you have to lay off people, teams?
No, actually, we did not. The major part of that redistribution, what we did was we took the team that was the production side of our print business, so the people who actually ran our printing plant, which we still own and operate, and we rolled them out into a separate company.
Okay.
And so we still do bear a big portion of the costs. We made sure that all of them were locked into contracts that actually gave them a raise on their way out, not the opposite, which a lot of news organizations have done, where when you outsource you outsource your printing to the same group of people, you're actually paying them less. We locked them into contracts that actually gave them a raise. We gave them equal benefits. We gave them equal access to all the facilities within our organization. But we were able to roll them out as a separate company where they can go find separate funding, where they now have the freedom to actually go win new contracts, new printing contracts. Because our printing plant in Hong Kong is massively underutilized. It's massively under capacity. And when we were running the actual print production, there was zero incentive, so we never put any effort into going out to win new contracts. And now this team can make sure that their futures are secured far beyond whatever our plans are for our print contract.
Right.
And let me clarify, we have no intent whatsoever of shutting down the print product. We still believe in it, we love it dearly. It's just making sure that long term, those group of people who are highly specialized have a future that is not solely tied to the SCMP.
Right. So right now, what percentage of costs at the SCMP is on the print product?
Percentage of cost.
Yes.
Okay, so that's really hard to break down.
Yeah.
Because every single one of our people still supports, from journalists to salespeople,
Got it.
they still support the print product. They still
Yeah.
support the content on the print product. They support the advertising on the print product back in operation. So I actually don't know how to answer that question. Our entire business is digital first in our publishing agenda and our publishing rhythm. And from all of our digital publishing, we still happen to curate what we believe to be a very, very high quality print product once a day.
So as you took the team through this change, this transformation, what did you have to do to alleviate some of the anxiety that surely everyone feels, or at least did feel, until most recently?
And they still might feel it. I would be shocked if that anxiety is completely lifted, because transformation is extremely difficult. And
Yeah.
a lot of the things that we're asking our organization to believe in are, they're theoretical. We talk a lot about strategy, and we can articulate it as well as anyone, but until they're put in play, and until our employees see how it allows our news organization to grow, or more importantly, how it makes them as journalists better, it's going to be hard for them to buy in 100%. I'll
Right.
tell you, when I first arrived, I knew that there were going to be some hard conversations, but I didn't expect the kind of pushback that I would receive in my first few months. I met a number of people in the organization, and those of you, everyone in this room will understand when I say that tenure at our organization is measured in decades, not in years. When I actually talk to technology companies and I mention that tenure is measured in decades in our organization, people are shocked, because
Right.
the idea of staying at a company for 10 years, that seems almost sacrilegious to millennials. But for ours, I was talking to a lot of people who've been in our company for 20, 30, 40 years. And the dismissive responses that I got for what I thought would be plans that were very exciting to them actually shook me a little bit. I heard more than once, "I've seen it before, it didn't work before, wake me up when it's over." Effectively that sentiment, I'm paraphrasing, but effectively that sentiment. And you know what, at the end of the day, you can't place fault on anyone who has that perception, because I think from their perspective, there have been multiple false starts. Certainly not just at the Post, probably across the industries here in Asia, but at the South China Morning Post, there have been multiple false starts. So the question in their mind is, okay, another guy who's going to come in, who doesn't really understand our business, and they have a legitimate gripe against me because I'm not from the industry, who's not even from Hong Kong or the Greater China region. What could this person with new ideas actually bring operationally, strategically, practically to make the news organization better.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. So you were, what, 34 years old when you took this job?
That's right.
What was it like for you to walk in there and say, look, I'm 34 years old, I'm not from the industry, I'm not from this city, this is what I know, and what was the one thing that you sold them on?
Well, I started off not with this is what I know. I started off with this is what I don't know.
Okay.
And I'm very fortunate. I joined a leadership team of executives that were incredibly tenured, that were best of the world and best in class at everything from newsroom operation all the way through as operations, all the way through back-end technologies and print operations. And one of the first things I acknowledged, not only to them, but to the company as a whole, was that I am an outsider, very much an outsider. That my expertise is the internet. My expertise very specifically is the creation of, distribution of, and the monetization of content across the internet. And then everything else that allows us to be able to run a high-functioning news organization, even in 2017 and beyond, that allows us to actually transform into a digital media company that serves not only Hong Kong, but the rest of the world. All of those skills and that knowledge set exists in the leadership team and not with me. And so for the first 6 months, I kept my mouth almost completely shut. And 6 months is not a very long time, but for me, it's a very long time to keep my mouth shut. And I spent 6 months listening and just learning and figuring out what the actual problems were within the organization that we actually had to fix. There was no blueprint when I came in. It wasn't a situation where it was a copy and paste that I had my assumptions because of technology and because we're so damn arrogant in the technology world that I thought, okay, here's the way we're going to save the news industry. I didn't come in with that plan. And so through those 6 months, I spent time with all of the naysayers. In fact, the easiest way to get a meeting with me was to tell me that you didn't believe in me. Because then there would be a one-on-one schedule, so I could ask you why you didn't believe in transformation, the struggles that you've already been through in your 20 years in the organization. And from there, we formulated what we believed to be the right plan for the company that took into heavy account the people in the company. Right? Because strategy can be easily articulated and then easily manipulated to not take into account the people that are there. To say that institutional knowledge is legacy that weighs us down, not necessarily legacy that is going to actually sustain the quality and the responsibility of the news industry.
And did you have a line of questioning with the people that you met, just to drill down on the problems? And what would be some of these questions you would ask, and how would you frame them?
Yeah, absolutely I had. Instead of going through the list of questions, there's a litany of questions.
Yeah.
Here's what I found out. The number one issue with the news organization that I had inherited was the completely, almost irrational lack of transparency. It was the fact that the organization historically, and by historically, to be very frank, I don't know how far this goes. I would probably guess that we're really talking about a decade of turmoil at the Post. Beyond that, we've been an organization that's been really, really bad at recording our own history, so I don't know how far beyond that extends. But at least for the decade prior to my arrival, there was the default operating cadence was that senior leadership would make decisions behind closed doors. They would communicate just enough for the operational teams to know what they had to do now, and almost never communicate the reasons why, and certainly never involve most of the organization in decision making. Okay, now, I wasn't there. My articulation or my understanding of how it operated, what I just said, is probably unfair to the regimes and the leadership that came before me. But I will say that was how it was perceived within the news organization, that there was a complete lack of transparency and why the business was making the decisions it was making across the board, from business decisions to editorial decisions to people decisions. And I realized that was the root of a lot of the toxicity in our culture. The lack of trust that existed between the newsroom and the business, between editorial leaders in the newsroom, because literally each desk had these giant silos, both. Right. It was also physical. If you've been to our old newsroom before we moved, this is a little bit of a non secular story, but we used to have this codified thing in the SCMP, people policy, where not only the size of your desk, but the height of your cubicle walls was dependent on your seniority.
Really?
And so the more senior you got, the walls, you could add levels to your cubicle walls. And
It does sound funny.
it does sound funny, but it is true. And so people who never got those promotions to build their walls, literally, would start stacking up papers and magazines and build fake walls. So if you walk through our old newsroom, it was a massive fire hazard. There were these, you could not see beyond the next table. And desk by desk, there was limited conversation and communication. Not to mention the fact that we exacerbated the situation by breaking the newsroom between two offices, one in Causeway Bay and one in Tai-Po. And Causeway Bay to Tai-Po is only half an hour, but in Hong Kong terms, half an hour is, Tai-Po pretty much was in mainland China, right? Like if you had no reason to go, you wouldn't go. It was that far by Hong Kong standards. So we broke the newsroom apart in a physical way, and there was just no communication, lack of trust, lack of transparency, and that became the #1 issue we had to tackle. Now, I'm not saying that we fixed it, because a decade of legacy takes a long time to unpeel and unwrap. I certainly haven't earned the respect and the full trust of my team. I still have to do much, much more, same with my leadership. But I can tell you that if you talk to anyone in my newsroom and in the organization, my guess is that almost all of them would tell you that the way that leadership communicates, the way that the organization makes decisions, the way that the internal teams operate with one another is night and day versus a year and a half ago. And I will count that as a small success. We still have a lot more work to do, but that I'm very proud of. The small changes that we've made on transparency and culture, I will count as a success.
And how do you communicate now? Do you do weekly stand-ups with the entire organization, or?
So not weekly, because that would probably kill me, because the amount of time that it takes to actually plan for these things. But we went from effectively only town halls that happened ad hoc whenever the CEO had something to say, which I believe was an average of once every 11 months, to now monthly town halls that last anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes that are broadcast across the entire organization live. So regardless of what office you're in, you can actually dial in live. It's also recorded and put on internal intranet. We are also completely transparent about our quarterly goals. So I will announce every single quarter what the company is trying to do for the quarter, and then 3 months later, I will announce how we did and actually grade ourselves and be very, very honest when we get a C- and why we got a C- and how we're going to fix it for the next quarter. Each of our major departments also holds their own quarterly town halls within the department, and the senior leaders have a much better rhythm of actually sending out emails to the entire organization, announcing changes, announcing new hirings, departures of people. And most importantly, we now, the entire company is on a centralized communications platform, which is Slack. And so we have general and random and editorial open channels where people can talk about practically anything with one another. And issues are debated out in the open. And again, remember, it's just 18 months. This is still early on. So there's still not as much conversation as I would like to see. There's still not as much transparency within the organization as I would like to see. But we have made big strides, and we intend on making even more.
Tell me about some of the mistakes that you made. Surely this 18 months was not as smooth sailing as it was.
It's not. I think that for whatever reason, to the press, it sounded like if it's been smooth sailing, probably because everyone focuses on this beer thing. That SCMP
the beer
has
is
free
good.
beer in the office now, and so everything seems rosy. Okay, as an example, one communications mishap that we had. This was a big one. We moved to a new office. I think most people know this. One of the major changes in the new office, besides the open office format, was the fact that about 50% of our employees moved onto what we call flex seating. So no more assigned desks. And so you have a locker, and every day you go to your locker, you unlock it, you put your bag in, you take your laptop out, whatever, and then you go and find a desk that you want to work at today, and then you sit down. When we announced it, and we knew that this was going to cause a little bit of controversy, I think we massively underestimated how attached people were to a physical space. And part of that was us underestimating how little the attachment was between employee and the company brand. Because, for instance, if you're working at Google and somebody tells you you're moving desks, most of the time you're like, whatever. because I love working at Google, because it's really cool when I go to a bar and I tell people, I work at Google, especially in Singapore, because the office is so damn nice. But if you don't have that attachment as an employee to the brand, then your attachment to the organization is something else. And it's certainly not a paycheck because you're in journalism. So what we realized for a lot of people, it was the physical desk that they'd been at for 10, 15 years.
So did people not want to move?
So the moment we announced
protest?
it, we did a terrible job we just said what's happening and why it's happening from a company point of view.
Right.
Not why it's happening and how it's going to make you a better journalist or reporter or salesperson. We did not go to the how it's going to help you individually. We also did not acknowledge the disruption that it would cause to our operation because it is brand new. We did not talk about the logistics of how we designed the rest of the office to make up for not knowing exactly where you're going to sit every day.
Right.
And it was, as you can imagine, a bit of an internal communications disaster.
So this basically applies to everyone on the editorial side.
No, it doesn't.
They can come in and choose a different desk every
It does
day.
not apply to everyone. It's about 50% of people across the organization,
Right.
and about 50% of the newsroom. Now, it took a good 4 months for us to unwind that mistake. And I know that 4 months doesn't sound like a lot of time, but I'm talking about 4 months of almost daily conversations with the right people, with advocates within the organization, and making sure that all of the small details and difficulties of moving somebody to flex seating was actually logistically figured out. As an example, one of the things that we never considered as management is one of the key reasons why people wanted to keep their own desk and so that they can leave their stuff on the desk was the fact that Hong Kong, like many other Asian cities, still operates off of physical name cards. And so journalists have this gigantic box of name cards that is never ordered alphabetically, but somehow shockingly miraculous. They always know whose name card is where, right? It's savants, right, in the newsroom. But having to move that box of name cards from locker to desk every single day is kind of annoying. And we had not considered that. So 2 things we had to, and also, again, Hong Kong government still loves to give out paper reports. So you show up to an official Hong Kong government event, you get a binder of information.
Right.
An actual binder, as opposed to like a zip drive, a USB drive or something. So we had to provide the storage. We hadn't thought about this. The storage within the organization, within the offices, to make sure that you could store your binders so that they're easily accessible. And we had to make sure that we come up with a scalable digital solution for digitizing your name cards. Again, I'm not saying that we've gotten this perfect, but these are the small logistical details and tactical details that because we were a little bit too arrogant and thinking we're giving you this amazing new office, this change you should buy into without us having to explain ourselves.
Right.
That arrogance led to a lot more work on the back end, and it was a step back in trust that we had to earn our way back from. Yeah.
So the New York Times wrote a piece about you guys. They did a profile on you
did
about a
they?
couple of months ago. Apparently everyone read it in the office. It was mixed. I mean, on the one hand, they were excited about the transformation that was happening in this space and how you are in some form or other a beacon of transformation in this region. But they were also very critical of this so-called independence of your editorial policy, for example. Do you feel that the media industry as a whole misunderstands your mission, your values, what you're trying to achieve? Do you feel misunderstood?
I'm not sure it matters whether or not we're properly understood. I don't think it affects the way that our newsroom operates and the way that they report, and I don't think it affects the convictions. In fact, I'm pretty sure it doesn't affect the convictions of our senior editorial leadership or their staff. It's a personal frustration because I still feel like if, in general, it's too easy to default to a simple argument about what it means to report on China and what it should look like versus the complexity of what it actually looks like. I'll say that the New York Times article was the most positive article the New York Times has ever written about us. So that's progress. They at least acknowledge the growth, and they acknowledge that we have impact in the world. The New York Times has every right, and this is the beauty of the industry that we're in, has every right to question our intent and our incentives. And you know what? the industry challenging our newsroom on editorial independence and challenging our newsroom on quality is great for me as a CEO, because there is no inspirational speech that I can give that motivates my newsroom better than the New York Times saying you guys are not being good enough at your jobs. And so one day do I hope that the global conversation around what the South China Morning Post does, I do hope that one day that conversation is primarily about the quality of our reporting, the quality of our products, and the impact that that reporting is having in not only elevating the overall global understanding of China, but also in challenging China to be better for its citizens as well as the world. I hope that the narrative about the South China Morning Post is based on that in the future.
Right.
Not just purely based on you are owned by X and therefore you must be Y. And so that's my hope. But between now and then, we're happy to keep pushing on and trying and doing our best to do the most objective, the most transparent reporting on China that we can do in an environment that everyone knows is not easy, and hope that our readers will be the ones that actually understand and see that quality.
And do you ever personally get involved in any of these types of editorial decisions concerning both Alibaba and China?
I do not. Well,
are you
what
on
do
that
you mean by with
escalation?
Alibaba?
Are you, well,
Yeah.
if it's a critical story about Alibaba, or if it's a sensitive story about
Yeah.
China, for example, are you part of that escalation process as, you know, the China desk brings?
Yeah, I don't even think that there's an escalation process within editorial, right? Because the way that the editorial newsroom works is that it is a constant discussion, a constant debate. I certainly do not get involved, right? That is not my purview. I am made aware of certain editorial decisions and why they were made, but that's the extent, because as CEO, my job is not to participate in the editorial decision making.
Do you ever feel like you would ever live this one down, this whole issue of China and the ownership?
Well, the issue of China, the issue of ownership, I do believe is two different things.
Right.
Will we ever, as a news organization, I assume you're asking, live it down? It's probably always going to be an uphill PR battle for us. And our choice is just whether or not we're going to distract ourselves by fighting it.
Yep.
We have said all we can say about the issue. Now, again, my job as CEO is to make sure that my newsroom is not distracted by the constant chatter. And I do think that our newsroom proves day in and day out the quality of their work and the objectivity of our coverage. And every single chance we have at proving that, we take as a challenge, and we love doing that.
Right. I was having a really good chat with a young, super smart freelance reporter just the other day, and she was saying to me, she's always been interested in the SCMP and would love to work for you guys at some point. And she's super, right, as far as talent goes, but she is most concerned about how China stories are being handled. Does she have a fair point?
As I was before I took the job. But what I got to do, which this young reporter probably almost certainly doesn't get to do, is I got to go within the organization during my due diligence process, and I got to question the senior editors and the leadership, and I got to question the incumbent CEO prior to me, and I got to question ownership and the board. And based on those conversations, I believed that the ownership's commitment to editorial independence was honest and earnest. I believed the strong convictions of our editorial leadership, and therefore I joined. And over the course of the last year and a half, I've been able to judge my editorial leadership and my ownership, not based on their words, but based on their actions. And their actions have spoken extremely loudly, and absolutely editorial independence is sacrosanct to our newsroom, to our ownership. Alibaba has never once, in 2 years of ownership, called or asked about a single story, and I do not expect them to at all. And our editorial leadership, I talk to them on a consistent basis, primarily because I need to learn about China in a way that only they understand. And I believe very, very strongly in their knowledge, and their credibility, and their authority as well. By the way, Ellen?
Yep.
Do you have one more question?
No, I do have one more question, actually.
Yes, please.
So if we were to take a leaf from tech, obviously that's very close to your heart. Would you consider putting out a transparency report every quarter about any influence or stories that you may have dropped or added or stayed away from deliberately or as part of your editorial policy?
That's a really good question. Here's the problem, though, right? That's a really good suggestion, and that's something that our editor-in-chief and I should probably talk about. My immediate reaction to this is every newsroom during the editorial agenda setting process on a daily basis makes decisions on stories.
Right.
So where are we drawing the line here? Right? Does any other news organization in the world put out a transparency report like that? Is there an example of that? Because I would love to see that.
Yeah, not that I know of. I think it would be interesting to see how you would structure that. For example, if you were to assign a story and then decide to drop it at the last moment, for example. That could be something
in the year and a half that I have been there, and I do trust my senior editorial masthead, which has been told very specifically that these are things that the masthead needs to discuss, and to some degree document, but most importantly, those are the things that I'm made aware of. In a year and a half that I've been CEO, there's not been a single instant of a story getting to the 1 yard line and being killed because of sensitivity. The one thing that again, it adjudicated out in public quite a bit was that we did publish online an opinion piece, a commentary, at one point, after which the senior editorial team made the decision to pull it from online. Okay? And we were transparent about the reasoning why we did that. We felt like if after the fact, that when we went back to check the facts, we could not actually, we could not verify most of the facts in the story, or many of the linchpin facts in the story or assertions in the story, and so we pulled it. So we were honest in our process when we took it down. That's the one instance in the last 18 months where it's something similar to that.
Right. I actually thought that was very well handled.
Not everyone agrees with you, and very frankly, we could probably have done that better. I'm glad that we were transparent about it. The SCMP from 10 years ago would never have mentioned why. We at the very least did. That is a step forward. There's still many more steps to take. First of all, the step should have been, if we did not think that we could verify those facts, that commentary should not have gone up in the first place. But our process was broken and it went up, right? And it was unfair to the author, which honestly, we put her in an extremely unfortunate situation that we apologize for, and we will still probably continue to apologize for. And that's a process breakdown that we need to fix, that we have since fixed as well.
Okay, let's go to questions.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom. You first.
We're frenemies, I suppose. I run Hong Kong. Shall I move around? Or? I run Hong Kong Free Press, which let's say complements the SCMP. I wanted to be more specific about some of the press freedom concerns, inevitably, because I think it's not so much censorship people are concerned of, but more self-censorship. And I think the New York Times article you spoke of wasn't as complimentary as
I said it was the most complimentary.
Okay.
Not complimentary, but
The most
the most that they have ever written.
I know you're not that involved on the editorial side, but how does the Post justify twice collaborating with the Chinese security services to interview detainees in China, a bookseller, a lawyer, and printed what numerous NGOs have called a forced confession, bearing in mind that no other international broadsheet would dream of doing that? You say there is transparency, so can you tell us who contacted whom to set those up, and any regrets with those stories?
Yeah, so I think we've been actually very open and honest about certainly the most recent
Gu Minhai,
of those two, yeah.
The bookseller.
So Gui Minhai, who's the bookseller from Hong Kong, is still in detention, and there was an interview that was set up by the Chinese security officials that South China Morning Post was invited to. I know that our newsroom actually debated quite a bit about whether or not to accept that invitation. They finally decided that the event itself was a story worth covering, so we sent a journalist in China to the event and we covered it as such. After the fact, we were very honest about the process, about who invited us, and the fact that we decided to go because we believed that it was a news story. If you were to ask our newsroom, if my editor-in-chief were here, she would 100% disagree with you in your characterization that was us collaborating with the Chinese authorities on forced confessions. That specific instance, we believe it was a news story that they were holding that press conference. If we weren't there, the likelihood is, if you look at all the other coverage, especially the Chinese media coverage of it, the picture that was used was not the two security guards that we used, the two security guards standing next to Gui Minghai. They were bordering the two of them. They were not, we were honest. I'm not going to speak about their coverage, but we were honest after the fact about how we got that, how we were asked to take that interview and why we decided to do it. We also printed the NGO's reaction to it. We printed opinions about how this was not a good situation. We also printed Angela Gui Minghai's daughter, wrote an open letter to us about it. We printed that open letter from Angela Gui with our response, which was the transparency of why we decided to take the interview. So I do believe that we operated with a good amount of transparency. Can we learn from this situation and be even better? Could we have published the story alongside, and again, this is now a personal opinion. I'm not editor-in-chief. Could we have published the story alongside of the transparency of the actual process and effectively did a play-by-play about how this all went down? Probably. This is something that, as a very traditional news organization, we have not been used to telling our own story in that way. And so these are definitely learning moments. I can tell you, Tom, that after the publication, there were multiple rounds of internal discussions and postmortems to make sure that we believe we did the right thing editorially, that aligned with our editorial convictions, and that we took whatever lessons and whatever feedback and critique we got from outside to make sure that we would be even better in that circumstance in the future. If that circumstance ever arises again, those conversations absolutely happened.
Just to follow up, since they foolishly left me with the microphone.
That is foolish for whoever is.
You can grab it in a minute.
Whoever is the mic runner, Susan.
All right, I'll be quick. But bearing in mind the upset it caused among the NGOs and the guy's daughter who wrote into the post, it is not the ethical thing to do, to perhaps accept the invite to go, but not participate, not ask questions, and become part of that forced confession story when they've got guides next to him.
We did ask questions.
You did ask questions of
We
him.
did ask questions.
But why not just report on the media circus that has been set up by the state security authorities?
I'm not really sure what you mean, but we were very open and honest that we asked questions. Well, I think this is where you would disagree with our editorial leadership. And sure, and the NGOs absolutely have a right to their opinion. We can learn from that opinion to continue to refine our own editorial convictions. But our editorial conviction at the moment of, and still today, was that it was the right thing to do to take the invitation because that was a newsworthy event that should have been reported on. And if we were not in the room, we would not have reported on the fact that it was the Security Council organized this event. We would not have published the photo of the security officials, effectively the guards, the police, standing next to Gui Minghai. And that is what we believe we added to the conversation. Yeah.
Next question.
I wonder if we're going to get a conversation about transformation now.
Hi, sorry, my name's Miley. I'm from Sydney, Australia. You spoke about pushback from people that had been in the job for decades. What about younger journalists who are dealing with management and CEOs that have been in the job for decades and aren't willing to diversify? How can we show them that they need to change or they're going to become irrelevant?
Oh boy, that's a good one. I'll tell you, that's a really good one. The first thing I would say is I really do hope that the younger generation of journalists all over the world, because this is not an Asia-specific issue. This is not a regional issue. This is not even a city. This is universal. I will say that I hope that younger journalists do not become disillusioned by the slow pace of transformation of the news industry. That they realize if they leave, those news organizations may never transform. And so my hope is that they will stick around and that they will grind it out. I know, again, I'm technically millennial, so I'm speaking to my peers. I know that grinding it out is not in the millennial vocabulary, but we do have to put that time and effort in. I do think that there is also a little bit of an arrogance to the way that we approach some of these conversations, because we believe we do have the answers, but we have the antidote. And I don't think that is 100% true. In fact, I don't even know if it's 50% true. I think that we have a tendency to want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And like I mentioned, to believe that institutional knowledge that has been built up over decades is no longer relevant because we're in 2018 and because social media is the primary distribution platform of content. We think that the old way of doing journalism is no longer relevant. I absolutely disagree with that. A lot of people ask me, should news be different today? Even today, you know, honestly, the title of this conference, what is news now? Sure, the packaging of news is different. Sure, news products might look different. But is news really different? Should news be different? I can tell you that a lot of young journalists think news gathering should be different. They think that they can justify never ever leaving their desk in their office because I can gather all the news in the world by going on Twitter, having the really, really well curated tweet deck, right? And sending a couple of emails. If I have a really, really well curated tweet deck and RSS, I can report news. Frankly, that is wrong. And so I think that younger generations believing that because we are tech literate and that we're digital natives, that we know how to fix the news industry, I think that is arrogance. But I would also say, don't leave and don't stay quiet. In those conversations, it is bilateral communication and bilateral learning. And the opportunities that you have to learn from people who are tenured, who spend 10, 20, 30 years doing the hard work of real journalism, learn from them at the same time. Spend the time to show them Instagram and Snapchat and why vertical video is not, you know, freaking a creation from the devil, right? And why click-by-click journalism has a part to play in storytelling, right? And explain why you still engage on Twitter, even though it's largely become a cesspool of trolls, right? Show them this new age of distribution. Show them this new age of engagement, of why it's so great that if you put your column online, even though you don't see your byline in print, you know you're going to get 10x the engagement and distribution, and people all around the world are going to be able to tell you their opinion on your thoughts. Right? So these are things, this is bilateral conversation. And so instead of us broadcasting what we hope the news industry to be like, let's learn and at the same time kind of tell and show. So that would be my opinion. Yeah.
Could we have one more question, Gary and Alan?
Trump's got a microphone.
If I could just ask you, sir, here. Oh,
Where are you?
Can you give me directional? I have no idea where.
Exactly. You're right or left? Where?
Hello?
Oh, you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
there we
Right.
go.
Here it is.
I was just asking, I'm 25, so I squarely fall within the millennial category, right? I was just saying that it's
You and I are different generations, by the way. I'm 35 and you're 25. We're already different generations.
I was just saying it's not necessarily always arrogance. Like, I'll give you one simple example. 15 years back, 10 years back, if there was a lot of corporatization in the media, and say, for example, I work in India, and if 10 years back journalists were facing the situation that we face now, where our corporate owners and editors do not wish to cross the line and criticize the government, I feel that a journalist then, that a 25-year-old journalist then wouldn't have much other choice, that if he wanted to stay in the field, he'd have to stick to it and try to pick his battles. I feel now it's, given the advent of the digital medium and the multiplicity of digital outlets and just the number of media houses, I feel that that has changed. So then when we see some of the legacy media houses, some of the biggest media houses doing some of the shoddiest journalism, and I won't even call it shoddy, doing some of the journalism that doesn't have the guts to ask the question, to speak truth to power. At that time, I feel that as a millennial, we're just impatient and we don't want to pick our battles. We want to be able to tell them that.
Yeah, it's a
you're
very
wrong
good
in
point. By the way, thank you so much for calling me out on that, because I obviously made a huge generalization to say that it's mostly arrogance. And you're right, it's not always arrogance. I managed to piss off young people as well as old people in this conversation, so great. I will say this, I'm gonna guess that in most newsrooms, when young journalists are frustrated, it's not, there's probably less of that argument of why they're getting frustrated. It's probably because the older generation is not changing publishing times and rhythm of the newsroom and refusing to adopt new technologies and new formats and all these other things, unwilling to train on video and all these other things. But of course, when there are moments when the young generation can also speak truth to power, I really do hope that you will feel an accountability to do that. We have access, we have distribution, we have a voice that older generations have never been, that they haven't had in the past, because we have these networks of broadcast that are available to us. But my hope is that the younger generations would do it responsibly, right, and with accountability. Listen, my entire intent is to say, even if your intent is not to be arrogant, if it's perceived as arrogance by those that are in leadership, we're still not going to win. We're still not going to help the news organization transform, because our opinions are going to be dismissed, right, and we're going to be marginalized and sidelined. So humility is not a widespread recognized characteristic of millennials. And I would love for it to become, once again, a widespread recognized characteristic of millennials, because not only do we understand where our compatriots and the younger generations are moving in user consumption, we're also respecting the wisdom that comes with years and age in the industry, and we are the ones that are being responsible to marry the two of them so that we have a really bright future for the industry. If we can do that, then that means a lot for the generation.
I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yes.
Thank you, Gary Liu.
Torben? Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Alan. And thank you, Torben, for that wonderful program. So now we're going to move on, and I think we need some chairs on the... Some more chairs there? Or we're just going to... We're going to start the next portion of the program in just a couple of minutes.